Incredible story coming your way. All right, so what's going on is we're going to talk a little bit about the constitutional right to life and what happened with the RH law case. All right, so basically, the biological fact is that the human life begins at human life begins at fertilization, at the fertilized ovum, right? The microscopic, at the embryonic stage, morula stage, the blastocyst stage, right? This is a fertilized ovum, is a living, genetically distinct organism from that moment. There's a zygotic genome activation. This is a baby boy or baby girl, right? Small, very small, right? Nobody's going to dispute that fact. But, this baby boy or baby girl is alive, very, very special, very valuable, and very precious, right? Very, 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 very valuable, very precious. The most valuable asset on the earth. Clinical or medical definition. So pregnancy is often incorrectly defined as as beginning at implantation because it is when the maternal physiological condition becomes detectable. Right? It's just wrong. Right? That's not a pregnancy. Um, and the Supreme Court saying, all right, so here we are in the Philippines, right? In the Philippines, we have this case, and it's the RH case, right? So we just I'll talk about the major players here in this case here in a minute, but the court acknowledges that life begins at fertilization, right? So the Supreme Court acknowledges that life begins at fertilization and rejected the notion that implantation marks the starting of life. So, Supreme Court of this country acknowledges that life begins at fertilization, right? So this is a constitutionally protected right to life from conception. So, I'm not crazy. This is actually real, right? So the Supreme Court um did acknowledge the right to life. And then the FDA, right? So the FDA defines abortifacient based on post-implantation laws. Drugs that prevent implantation are considered contraceptives, not abortifacient, right? So, why? Because so the Supreme Court rejected the notion that implantations marks the starting of life, but the FDA accepts the notion that implantation marks the starting of life. All right, see what I'm saying? All right, all right. Let's continue. All right, so the conflict is the court deferred to the FDA certification process for enforcement purposes, accepting a framework that allows pre-implantation embryonic death, despite recognizing life begins at fertilization. Now, the moral and scientific tension is that biologically fertilized ova are alive, yet regulatory practice treats their pre-implantation destruction as legally permissible. So the conclusion is that reliance on the FDA's implantation-based framework is legally convenient, but scientifically inaccurate. It results in the death of these children, right, that are already living human organisms, right? So, the Supreme Court of the Philippines, in upholding the RH law, must have known that the FDA relies on implantation-based definition of pregnancy that excludes pre-implantation embryonic death. By deferring to this regulatory framework, the court effectively allowed the legal destruction of living human organisms that begin at fertilization, even though the court acknowledged biologically that life starts at fertilization. It did not ensure that the law or its enforcement actually protects that life, okay? Creating a clear injustice. In practice, this ruling permits the death of embryos before implantation while still claiming constitutional compliance, a moral and scientific contradiction that undermines the protection of the most vulnerable and valuable, right, human lives, right? The future, very, very valuable human lives, right? It reads vulnerable. But hey, what do we got here? The Supreme Court. Okay, so basically, they're saying, the court acknowledges, right, that life begins at fertilization because it would be nonsense to put no reasonable person would a learned and honorable judge would never accept the notion that implantation marks the beginning of life, because it doesn't. It's just nonsense. So we have there, and the judge accepts that fertilization is the thing. Yay, that's good. But then Yeah, but the FDA is going to regulate. What? Okay, all right. So let's look at the players here involved. All right, so what do we got? So this is the guy, Honorable Edsel Luckman Sr. So this guy was um, the guy that he's an advocate for human rights and the rule of law and social justice, and he authored this the RH law, right? The RH law, Reproductive Health Act, right? So the Reproductive Health Act is the one that would you know have these birth control pills permissible. The idea is that these the poverty and all this stuff, but still, even with all the poverty and all this stuff, these are abortifacients, and these are very, very dangerous and destructive, and they will actually cause the death of the baby. Who's the challenger? Who they made a constitutional challenge here is Pro-Life Philippines Foundation. I don't know very much about these, but they are they're I think it's based on a religious group. I think they're a little bit Catholic and everything like this. You had to get the Catholic imagery here, which is usually the case. And then over here we get the actual the ruling on the well, so what are they saying? They're saying that, yeah, of course, the fertilization is the starting of human life. I mean, no, no reasonable and learned judge, no reasonable and learned judge would ever accept the notion that implantation is the starting of pregnancy. It's just nonsense, right? That's foolish. And then what else we got here? Okay, so yeah, this is the law here. Just reproductive responsible parenthood and reproductive act, and I totally, I understand, these poor families are having, six, seven, eight, nine children, and then they're poor and everything. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about that, and that is an issue. I understand. We have to have the young unmarried women are having babies and all that stuff, and that is true, right? We're not really talking about that, but that is absolutely true. But see, the thing is, it has to be non-abortifacient. But the thing is, the problem here is that it is, right? Supplies which do not prevent the implantation of a fertilized ovum. So it talks exactly about that, right? So, as determined by the Food and Drug Administration, but the Food and Drug Administration, what do? They will define the implantation as the starting of a pregnancy, right? You see my circle where we're going here? This is going around in a circle. You know what I mean, right? So, and now what do we have? We get these drugs um that are um abortifacient that are sold, right? So, which is unconstitutional, if you will. So the thing is that this is like passing the buck a little bit, right? So this is a huge cause for concern because the babies will be killed, right? So that's what's actually happening, right? Just like in my hometown, right? My own cousin, right, writes these terrible prescriptions to end the pregnancy, right, to kill a baby, right, based on the implantation note, the notion that the pregnancy started at implantation, right? So, it's quite something here. All right, so the Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Act is technically unconstitutional, right? Because it allows for these drugs that are abortifacient, which is contrary to the Constitution of the Philippines, right? So it violates the right to life of the unborn. Right? This is a serious thing. Let's read this very slowly. The RH law, reproductive health law, violates the right to life of the unborn, according to the petitioners. Notwithstanding its declared policy against abortion, the implementation of the RH law would authorize the purchase of hormonal contraceptives, IUDs, and injectables, which are abortives. Okay, in a violation of the 12th section, Article 2 of the Constitution, which guarantees protection from both the life of the mother and the life of the unborn from conception. From conception. This is very, very important. And this is a very beautiful thing. I mean, at least we have that from in the Constitution, right? That's the highest law of the land, right? That the baby is constitutionally protected from conception, right? So that's okay. And the Supreme Court of the Philippines did reject that nonsense garbage idea that implantation is a starting on pregnancy, because that's just nonsense. But the problem here, the problem here is that the court says, well, the FDA is going to regulate these drugs, right? Instead of, and what happened here is very, very strange. I know I got 666. I don't. So what happened here? I don't even know. That freaks me out a little bit, but it's not really relevant. But we do have this thing. What is this thing? Right? This whole thing, basically permitted these drugs that are abortifacient to kill these children, and I don't know. I just happen to have this number here, right? So this is the e-library, which is talking a little bit about which is the publication of the case, right? That is the publication of the case, and we just happen to have this number here. That so what's going on here? If you research here, you'll see that these drugs, the Supreme Court is basically washing its hands and saying, oh, well, yeah, of course it's not implantation, and of course it's fertilization. But then they're saying, yeah, but the FDA is going to regulate, knowing full well that the FDA, it takes the incorrect notion of the implantation, and then these drugs will be, given. So what? What? The ends doesn't justify the means. I mean, you have these poor families. I get that. I mean, but no. I mean, you can't violate the right to life. This is a, is this ruling? I mean, the Supreme Court must have known that the FDA anyway. So you see my story here. Let's recap on the story. So first of all, we got the RH law. The RH law says, that we can start regulating. We could start having the FDA can start regulating these birth control pills. We have the RH law right here, and in the to the priority needs of women, and to system for poverty reduction and all this stuff. Yeah, okay, I get that, but the problem is that this drug is an abortifacient, right? So that's the real problem. There's a serious problem here. So then pro-life Philippines is all like, hey, this is unconstitutional, right? You cannot actually have that. But then the Supreme Court is all like, oh yeah, we will reject the notion that implantation is a starting a pregnancy. That's nonsense. But we will then allow the FDA, which accepts the notion that implantation is a starting a pregnancy, to regulate these drugs. So then, what? You know what I mean? Like I'm having a hard time to put it into words, but that's exactly what's happening here, right? And then now what? You can go to the store and you can buy these pills, right? Yeah, that's the thing, right? We can actually buy these pills, and then and then what? And then the woman can, can become pregnant. The baby can be conceived, and then the baby will die at the very natural and healthy stage of implantation. You know, Contrary to the constitutional right to life. All right? You see what I'm saying here? The end result is that the baby will die at a very, very healthy and natural stage of implantation. All right? So what? I'm having a hard time to make sense of this, right? I'm really, really having a hard time. At least, there's a constitutional right to protection for the right to life, right? That is a constitutional right. I mean, that is true. And there's no abortion here, and there's really no abortion here. I mean, this is just as a civilized country, but we still have this, right? So this is very, very dangerous, because there's, we know that birth control will really, really be a serious thing, right? Anyway, um, if you've you know, maybe I didn't explain the story very well, but it is a circle, right? That is very strange, a very strange thing, a very sad thing because the pills are still, you know, you could still actually get these pills at your you know so-called doctor, and then the doctor will be violating his Hippocratic oath and all this stuff, because I mean he knows, right? He or she knows it's an abortive agent. Right? I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.